Welcome to Threads of Truth, the show where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we explore a case that has haunted a quiet New Jersey town for over 5 decades.
It really has. A deeply unsettling one.
Imagine Springfield, Union County, New Jersey, back in the summer of 1972. You know, a landscape of manicured lawns, seemingly total suburban calm.
Pretty much the picture of peaceful suburbia, yeah.
It was August 7th, a warm Monday, when a 16-year-old girl named Jeannette DePalma left her home. Simple plan. Just going to visit a friend.
A perfectly normal teenage activity, something kids did all the time.
Exactly. But she never arrived at her friend's house. She was never seen alive again. The ordinary just vanished into something chilling.
It's truly a grim beginning to what became an incredibly complex and, frankly, bizarre mystery. Just 6 weeks later, September 19th, a horrifying discovery completely shattered that suburban peace.
And it wasn't even a person who found the first clue, right?
No, that's one of the really stark details. It began with a dog belonging to someone living in a new apartment complex nearby. The dog came home, not with a stick or a ball, but with something horrifying.
Yeah.
A human forearm and hand.
Wow. Just imagine being that owner, the shock.
Unthinkable. And that gruesome find immediately led police to Jeannette's decomposed body. She was found atop a local cliff face, a place that already had this ominous nickname, the Devil's Teeth.
The Devil's Teeth. Even the name sounds like something out of a story.
Right, and it wasn't named that after the fact. It had a reputation.
And what investigators reportedly found at the scene, at least according to some of those very first accounts, was apparently unlike anything they'd seen before. It sparked these immediate dark rumors, occult rituals, things like that.
Exactly. Whispers that then just spiraled, over decades into intense speculation and urban legend.
So our mission today is really to try and unpack this bizarre and unsolved case. We need to dissect the pretty sparse facts from this tangled web of legend and speculation that's really overshadowed the tragic reality for so long.
Precisely. We want to help you understand not just what might have happened, but also what was reported as happening, how those reports conflicted. And that's key. And crucially, how this local tragedy transformed into a sort of nationwide, almost cult urban legend.
We'll be walking through all those conflicting narratives, the theories, but also remembering the enduring pain of a family that's still, after all this time, seeking answers.
It's definitely a story where that thread of truth feels incredibly thin sometimes, almost lost in, layers and layers of guesswork and, let's face it, sensationalism.
Okay, so let's start with Jeannette DePalma herself. Who was this young woman whose life was cut short so tragically?
Well, she was 16 years old, a student living in Springfield Township, New Jersey. Just a regular kid, really.
And from all the accounts, people described her as quite devoutly Christian, known to carry her Bible with her frequently.
Mm-hmm. And that detail, as you mentioned, it becomes surprisingly significant when we start looking at some of the much darker theories that emerged about her death later on.
Right. Because it paints a picture of her character that seems, at odds with some of the speculation. She was, by all accounts, just a typical teenager living in a seemingly typical suburban town.
That's it. And that contrast is stark. It immediately clashes with the sinister rumors that would eventually swirl around her death.
So let's go back to that day, August 7th, 1972, the day she vanished. What were her last known movements?
She told her mother she was going to take a train, just heading over to a friend's house. A simple, everyday plan for a teenager back then, right?
Right.
She was apparently quite reliable, dependable.
Okay.
But she never made it to that friend's house. She just disappeared.
Yep.
Vanished without a trace, somewhere between leaving home and arriving at her destination.
Her family must have been frantic when she didn't show up, when she didn't call. I mean, back then, no cell phones, no instant communication.
Exactly. A delay might have been slightly more common, perhaps, but for a reliable kid like Jeannette, not showing up would have set off alarm bells pretty quickly, you'd imagine. The initial concern would have turned into panic.
So what were the immediate steps? When did she get reported missing? Did they start searching right away?
Well, the initial investigation would have involved, the usual frantic calls, checking with her friends, known hangouts, maybe inquiries along that train route she was meant to take. But despite those immediate desperate efforts, nothing. She remained missing for 6 agonizing weeks.
6 weeks in the middle of summer.
Right. And that time lapse, those 6 weeks between August 7th and September 19th, is a critical factor, especially with the summer heat. Decomposition would have been very rapid.
Which leads us to the discovery. You mentioned the dog.
Yes, the dog. From that new apartment complex near the Hudale Quarry, returning home with the human forearm in hand. I mean, it's just such a visceral, disturbing detail. It immediately sets this incredibly grim tone for everything that follows.
Truly chilling, and that's what finally led the police to her.
That's right. Following that horrific clue, the trail led investigators directly up to a cliff within the Hudale Quarry.
And this quarry, this wasn't just some random out-of-the-way spot, was it? It had this local reputation already. You mentioned the Devil's Teeth.
It absolutely did, and this is where it gets kind of interesting culturally speaking. The Hudale Quarry itself was known as a local hangout spot. Teenagers, maybe others, would go there. So in one sense, finding a body there isn't completely out of left field. It was accessible.
Okay, so it wasn't totally isolated.
Not totally isolated, no. But at the same time, it carried this really ominous nickname, the Devil's Teeth. And importantly, this wasn't a name given after Jeannette's death. It was apparently already known for, quote, strange activity. Some locals actively avoided it, saw it as kind of a cursed or negative place.
So that pre-existing reputation must have immediately fed into the darker interpretations once her body was found there.
Oh, absolutely. It almost provided a ready-made narrative for something sinister, didn't it? The geography itself adds to it, remote enough to be hidden, but known enough to be a place people went. It's this weird juxtaposition.
And when the police finally located Jeannette's body up there on the cliff,
Yeah.
the condition, that presented huge problems right away, didn't it?
Immense problems. Her body was found in a very advanced state of decomposition. 6 weeks in the summer heat, outdoors. It would have been extreme. And that, as you can imagine, made it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to determine key facts about how she died.
So the official cause of death.
Officially ruled undetermined. Precisely because of the decomposition. Forensic science in 1972, while progressing, was nowhere near what we have today. Decomposition was an even bigger barrier to getting clear answers back then.
Were there any clues at all? Any indication of what might have happened?
Well, the state of the remains was just a massive hurdle. It handicapped the investigation from the start. Strangulation was suggested as a possibility, perhaps based on some subtle indicators the medical examiner saw, or maybe just process of elimination. But there was absolutely no definitive proof.
Okay.
And crucially, there were no obvious signs of other major trauma, no reported signs of gunshots, no stab wounds. The absence of that kind of clear, violent injury, while it doesn't rule out foul play, it definitely narrowed the immediate possibilities and made it really hard for police to classify the death definitively.
So undetermined, it leaves this huge void. Doesn't mean no foul play, just they couldn't prove how she died.
Exactly. And that void is fundamental. It's where the certainty ends and the speculation really begins to take over. Which brings us to maybe the core enigma of this whole case. The official investigation itself and the incredibly conflicting reports that came out of it.
All right, this is where things get really murky, isn't it? Where the factual ground just seems to shift.
Completely. And compounding the problem, police records for the case are apparently incomplete. Many of the original files reportedly just went missing over the years.
That's not good for a murder investigation or any investigation.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It immediately complicates any attempt to find clarity now or even back then. It makes reconstructing those crucial first days and weeks incredibly difficult. It's like trying to solve a puzzle when half the pieces are just gone. Missing records are a huge red flag in any cold case. They create this vacuum where solid information should be, and that vacuum just sucks in speculation, misinformation, maybe even deliberate disinformation. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the controversy about the crime scene itself.
Okay, so what was the controversy? What were the conflicting reports about what they found up there on the cliff with Jeannette's body?
This is central to the whole mystery. Initial claims, reportedly coming from some police officers on the scene, maybe some really unofficial reports, mentioned finding really unusual objects arranged around her body.
Unusual how?
Specifically, they talked about finding what they interpreted as occult symbols. Things like crosses made from sticks or twigs, a sort of halo of stones placed around her head, and even animal bones scattered nearby. Vivid, disturbing details that immediately painted a really terrifying picture.
Wow. Okay. That sounds incredibly specific and strange, like something staged.
Exactly. But then, almost immediately, those claims were flatly denied
Denied. By who?
by other police officers who were also at the scene, and in later, perhaps more official reports. They explicitly stated that those symbols were not present. Their description was starkly different. They said it was simply a decomposed body hidden in thick brush. There were no occult symbols, no arrangements, nothing like that whatsoever.
Wait, so you have police officers at the same scene giving completely contradictory accounts of what they saw. One side says occult symbols, the other says absolutely nothing unusual.
That's precisely the problem. It's hard to imagine two more different descriptions. Who do you believe? What was actually observed? Was it a case of misinterpretation, exaggeration, or were things moved or missed? It raises so many questions.
How does that even happen? How do investigators disagree on something so fundamental about a crime scene?
It's baffling and incredibly damaging because think about it. How did these early disagreements within law enforcement itself fuel the mystery and the rumors? When the people investigating can't even agree on the basic facts of the scene, it completely undermines public trust. It creates this incredibly fertile ground for conspiracy theories to bloom.
Yeah, you can see how that would happen. If the police can't agree, then anything seems possible.
Right. In the absence of clarity from official sources, these conflicting narratives don't just confuse people, they become the very foundation upon which future myths get built, often irreversibly. And that satanic cult theory, it emerged almost instantly.
Fueled by this confusion and the gossip.
Fueled by the confusion, local gossip, and yes, some sensationalist media reporting right at the time. This wasn't just a random rumor. It was, in retrospect, a chilling precursor to the much bigger satanic panic that would grip parts of society in the 1980s.
So like an early example of that kind of fear.
Exactly. It highlights how these early whispers, in cases like Jeannette's, kind of laid the groundwork for those broader societal anxieties about cults and ritual abuse that exploded about a decade later. It's almost like this tragedy became a template or maybe tinder for a larger moral panic down the road.
And amidst all this chaos and these wild rumors, did the police have any actual leads, any suspects?
They did try to follow up on some things. In late 1972, they released a police sketch. It was of a man known only as Red.
Red, who was he?
He was described as a known local alcoholic, someone who apparently lived rough, maybe in a campsite somewhere near the quarry where Jeannette's body was found. That proximity obviously made him a significant person of interest. They definitely wanted to question him urgently.
Did they find him?
No, he was never located, just vanished. Another frustratingly loose end in an already completely convoluted investigation.
So potential witness, maybe even a suspect, just disappears.
Gone. And the fact that Red couldn't be found just adds another thick layer of complication and frustration. It also highlights the challenges of police work back in the early 70s. Without the databases, the technology we have now, it was much easier for someone to just drop off the radar. It's a gaping hole in that early investigation that's never been filled.
Okay, so summing up that initial phase, missing records, police contradicting each other about the crime scene itself, a potential person of interest who vanishes. It's just a recipe for an enduring mystery, isn't it?
Absolutely. With that level of confusion and lack of clarity right from the start, it's almost inevitable that this case wouldn't just fade away. It was bound to fester.
And fester it did. Decades later, with the rise of the internet, Jeannette's story found a whole new, much larger audience. And that's when the speculation, especially online, really exploded.
Yeah, the internet gave it a whole new life, or maybe a whole new afterlife.
So let's walk through some of those theories that have circulated online and in popular culture, the ones that have really come to dominate the narrative around her death. The most famous one, the one everyone seems to know, is the occult ritual murder theory.
It absolutely is. It's the most dramatic, the most lurid, and the one that captures the imagination or maybe the fear most strongly.
And the basis for this is primarily those initial disputed reports from the scene, right? The sticks, the stones.
Primarily, yes. It leans heavily on those unconfirmed reports of occult symbols. The crosses, the halo of stones, the animal bones. It creates this compelling, terrifying image, doesn't it? This young, devout girl found in this sinister, supposedly ritualistic setting. It plays on really deep-seated fears about hidden evils.
But what about actual evidence? Was there ever anything concrete to back it up?
That's the critical point. There has never been any definitive physical evidence produced to substantiate this theory. Ever. No forensic analysis confirming the animal bones were part of a ritual, no link established to any known cult activities in the area at the time, nothing solid.
So it's all based on those contested initial reports.
Pretty much. And in fact, lead investigators, looking back, and especially more recent reviews of the admittedly limited crime scene photos that do exist, have actively debunked these claims of ritualistic elements. They've stated clearly they don't see evidence of it.
Yet the rumor persists. Why do you think that is?
That's the power of a good story, isn't it? Especially a scary one. It seems some narratives are just too horrifyingly captivating for people to let go of, even when the evidence is here. The occult angle provides a kind of dramatic, almost cinematic explanation for something otherwise baffling and terribly sad.
Okay, so that's the big sensational theory. What about other possibilities? There's the straightforward murder theory, right? Just a tragic, conventional killing.
Yes, and this theory feels much more grounded. Setting aside the sensationalism for a moment, several elements support it, things that fit within standard crime investigation patterns.
Like what?
Well, first, the location. Her body being left in a remote, hidden spot strongly suggests concealment. Someone wanted to hide the crime, not necessarily showcase it as part of a ritual. Then there's the suggested possibility of strangulation. Again, not definitive, but it's a common method in violent assaults.
Right.
And as we touched on, we'll get into more detail, there's that very recent, very chilling development involving a known serial killer potentially confessing or alluding to it.
Okay, we definitely need to come back to that. But even with this more grounded murder theory, the challenges remain huge, don't they?
Absolutely. The lack of a definitive cause of death is still the biggest hurdle. It impedes any conclusive finding. And the absence of a clear suspect beyond the vanished red makes it incredibly difficult for law enforcement to build a case, even now.
Then there's another theory that often comes up in cases like this, especially with an undetermined cause of death in a remote location, the overdose or accidental death theory.
Right. This one speculates that maybe Jeannette wasn't alone. Maybe she was with a group of friends, maybe experimenting with drugs, something that was certainly happening in the early 70s, and perhaps she suffered an accidental overdose.
And the friends panicked.
That's the hypothesis. The friends, terrified of getting into trouble with the law, or just sheer panic, then decided to move her body and leave it at the quarry to avoid any connection or responsibility.
It's a plausible scenario in some ways. You hear about things like that happening.
It's a scenario investigators often have to consider, yes. It offers a non-homicidal explanation for a body found in a strange place. However, in Jeannette's case, this theory runs headlong into a very strong counter-argument.
Which is?
Her family and her close friends. They vehemently deny this possibility. They point to her deeply religious nature, her character, and say it's highly improbable, almost unthinkable, that she would have been involved in drug use or been in a situation where that kind of accident could occur.
So you have this direct conflict between speculation based on kind of general possibilities and the specific knowledge of those who knew her best.
Exactly. It highlights that tension. Is it more likely that a generally plausible scenario occurred, or that the specific character described by loved ones makes that scenario extremely unlikely? In this case, the family's testimony really pushes back hard against the overdose narrative.
Okay. So we have these different theories swirling around, and the initial confusion, the conflicting reports, they just got amplified over time, didn't they? Through folklore, media.
Massively amplified. Sensationalist reporting played a huge role right from the beginning. Those initial newspaper reports back in the 70s, they definitely seized on the more dramatic aspects.
The occult stuff.
Absolutely. They focused on those unconfirmed occult elements because, well, it sold papers. It was shocking, it caught the public's eye, and it fueled those local whispers and fears immediately.
And then over the years, just word of mouth.
Word of mouth, local legends, they took on a life of their own. Each retelling might have slightly distorted the story, maybe added a new, more horrifying detail, maybe just emphasized one aspect over others. The story got further and further from the verifiable facts.
That's how urban legends work, isn't it?
Precisely. A kernel of truth, or in this case, maybe a kernel of contested reporting, gets embellished, repeated, passed around, until the legend itself becomes more known, more believed than the original stark reality.
And this process got another boost you mentioned from the satanic panic phenomenon later on. Even though it peaked in the 80s, it reached back and affected how people saw Jeannette's death from 72.
It really did. The Satanic Panic created this pervasive public fear, intense anxiety about ritual abuse, cults, sacrifices. It was everywhere for a while. So when people looked back at Jeannette's case, those old, unconfirmed rumors of occult symbols suddenly fit perfectly into this new, terrifying cultural narrative.
He gave them a framework.
Exactly. It provided a frightening lens through which to view those earlier, ambiguous details. It essentially validated the rumors that had been floating around for a decade, embedding the occult narrative even deeper into the public consciousness, even though no new evidence had actually surfaced. It just fit the fear of the times.
So the case kind of faded for a while, became more of a local legend, until a specific magazine brought it back into the spotlight. Weird NJ.
That's right. For years, it was largely a cold case, known mostly locally. Then, in the late 1990s, Weird NJ magazine, which is dedicated to exactly these kinds of strange tales, local legends, and unsolved mysteries in New Jersey, started publishing articles about Jeannette DePalma.
Why then? Did they uncover something new?
They reportedly started covering it after receiving anonymous letters and tips. People claiming to have inside information, often related to the occult aspects of the case. Whether those tips were credible is another question, but it was enough to get them writing about it.
And their reporting had a big impact.
A huge impact on public perception. It brought the case roaring back into the public eye after years of relative quiet. It really transformed it from a forgotten local tragedy into a much more widely known mystery. And critically, their focus often leaned into the weird, the unexplained, the occult angles.
Because they kind of cemented its status as this dark legend.
You could definitely say that. Their reporting cemented its status as a local urban legend. It shaped how a whole new generation encountered and understood the story. It became the platform for the occult theory to thrive again, giving it a renewed sense of, well, maybe not legitimacy, but certainly popular currency, regardless of the lack of official proof. It became a canonical Weird NJ story.
Passed around like a campfire tale.
Pretty much, yeah. Further obscuring the few concrete facts we actually have.
And just when you think the narrative couldn't get any more complex, there's this recent and frankly really chilling twist involving a known serial killer.
Yes. This is a major development, relatively speaking, coming almost 50 years later. In 2021, Richard Cottingham.
The Torso Killer, a notorious name.
Exactly. A convicted New Jersey serial killer, responsible for truly horrific crimes against numerous women, often operating right in that same area, New Jersey and New York, during that exact era, the 70s and early 80s.
Okay. What did he say?
He made a series of written statements. He didn't give a full, detailed confession naming Jeannette specifically, but he strongly alluded to possibly having abducted and killed her while she was hitchhiking back in 1972.
Hitchhiking. Was she known to hitchhike? The plan was to take a train.
That's a good question. The train was the plan, she told her mother. Whether something changed or if Cottingham's memory or statement is entirely accurate about the hitchhiking detail is unclear. But the illusion itself, connecting himself to her disappearance around that time and place, it's huge.
Wow. That throws a completely different light on everything, doesn't it?
Completely.
Yeah.
It offers a tragically plausible, if utterly devastating, alternative explanation. It grounds the case not in occult fantasy, but in the grim, tangible reality of a known predatory serial killer operating at that time in that place.
It shifts the focus entirely.
It really does. From ritualistic speculation to the horrifying possibility of a random, brutal encounter with a predator, it adds this concrete, albeit terrible, new thread to this incredibly tangled narrative. And it's a lead that law enforcement would have to take very seriously, even decades later.
Does it give the family any answers? Or just a different kind of horror?
That's the question, isn't it? Maybe a different kind of horror, but perhaps also a path towards an answer, even if it's the worst possible one. It moves away from the bizarre rumors towards something potentially verifiable if Cottingham provides more details or if any other evidence corroborates it.
Okay, so we've walked through the initial facts, the murky investigation, the pervasive rumors, the role of media and folklore, and now this potential serial killer connection. Let's try to pull some threads together in our analysis. Why, after more than 50 years, is the death of Jeannette DePalma still unsolved?
It really boils down to a perfect storm of factors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the inherent challenges of a cold case this old are immense. We talked about the missing or incomplete original police files. It's a massive handicap right there.
Yeah, trying to reinvestigate without the initial groundwork is almost impossible.
It's incredibly difficult. Those files might have contained crucial witness statements, photos, leads that were never followed up properly, information that's just lost to time now. It severely limits what modern investigators can do.
In the state of her body, the decomposition remains a central problem.
Absolutely fundamental, making a definitive cause of death impossible to determine. That's crippling for a murder investigation. You don't know how she died. That makes figuring out who or why exponentially harder. It leaves investigators without that crucial starting point motive method.
It obscures the most basic forensic evidence.
Totally. If there had been clear signs of struggles, specific injuries, a definite manner of death, like a gunshot, it would have provided a much clearer path. But without that, investigators were operating in a fog from day one.
Which allowed something else to take over.
Exactly. And this is maybe the most powerful and tragic lesson from this case. The paralyzing effect of rumors, especially sensational ones. Those initial unconfirmed reports of occult symbols seemed to just completely take over the case.
How so?
They obscured the facts. They might have diverted investigative resources, or at least attention. They certainly shaped public perception. A single unproven rumor can become a kind of narrative black hole, sucking in all the attention, distorting everything, until the actual search for truth becomes almost secondary to the compelling, terrifying story.
The story became more real than the facts.
In many ways, yes, that seems to have happened here. The sensational story captured the imagination and held on tight.
And the media played a huge role in amplifying that sensational story, didn't it? From those first newspapers to Weird Ninja years later.
A massive role. The initial sensationalism in the 70s papers was very much of its time, grabbing headlines, focusing on the most shocking, albeit unverified details like the occult angle, because that's what sold.
And Weird Ninja.
Fast forward to Weird Ninja in the late 90s. It catered to a different audience, maybe, one already interested in the strange and unexplained. They became the modern keepers of the legend. But the effect was similar, keeping the focus on the dramatic, often unproven aspects. This continuous media attention, often prioritizing the occult narrative, profoundly shaped public understanding and memory.
To the point where many people only know the satanic cult version.
Sadly, yes, it overshadowed the simple, tragic reality. A young girl disappeared and was found dead under unclear circumstances. The lurid story often buried the victim.
So the core challenge here is trying to separate that thin thread of truth from decades of folklore, rumor, and conflicting information.
It feels almost impossible sometimes, doesn't it? The actual facts are so tangled up in those conflicting police reports, the sensational media coverage, the missing files, and this incredibly persistent urban legend. It's a Gordian knot of information and misinformation.
You're constantly weighing the official reports with all their gaps and inconclusiveness against these dramatic rumors that lack solid proof.
Right. The official story offers frustration and uncertainty. The rumors offer a compelling, almost cinematic narrative, but one built on shaky foundations. And the heartbreaking reality might just be that the actual truth of how Jeannette died is forever lost. Lost to time, lost to decomposition, lost perhaps to the satanic panic influences, lost to missing files.
Which brings us to the human cost. This isn't just a fascinating mystery or an urban legend. It's about a real person, a real family. How does an unsolved case like this, especially one wrapped in such bizarre speculation, affect them and the community?
It leaves an open wound. For the community, it's a lingering shadow, a dark spot on local history, a legend tied to a specific place, the Devil's Teeth, that continues to echo. For the family, it's unimaginable.
Yeah.
The lack of closure, the absence of justice, and having to constantly contend with these wild, often disturbing and unproven stories being told about your daughter or sister.
Yeah.
It must be an unbearable, ongoing trauma. They're left not just with grief, but with these profound, unanswered questions, and the feeling perhaps that Jeannette herself got lost beneath the weight of the legend.
It really makes you think. When the story, the legend, becomes more powerful than the facts, what hope is there for real resolution?
That's a deep and troubling question, and one this case forces us to confront.
So, thinking about everything we've unpacked today, the sparse initial facts, the decades of intense rumor, the official gaps, the conflicting reports, and now this recent chilling allusion from Richard Cottingham, Where does that leave us? What do you think might have happened?
It's incredibly difficult to say with any certainty, isn't it? Does that idea of a ritual killing, fueled by those initial contested reports in the later satanic panic context, still hold some unsettling resonance?
Or does the possibility of a random brutal murder, maybe at the hands of someone like Cottingham, a known predator active then and there, feel more tragically plausible, more depressingly real, perhaps?
That's the dilemma. One explanation feels almost mythical, the other feels horribly mundane in the context of violent crime, yet both lack definitive proof tying them directly to Jeannette.
And how do we, just as people trying to understand the past, distinguish between an unsettling truth and just a captivating legend when the evidence is so fragmented, so obscured by time, by sensationalism, by missing pieces?
It's a profound challenge. Maybe the most important thing is to acknowledge the uncertainty, to stick to what little is known, and to remember the human being in the center of it all, beyond the legend.
A question that haunts this case and perhaps will never be fully answered.
Leaving us, as always, with the threads.
The death of Jeannette DePalma is a mystery that has certainly lingered for over 50 years. A young woman vanishes, her body is found on a cliff, a town is gripped by fear, speculation runs wild about satanic cults. The threads of truth in this case are just so tangled, conflicting evidence, a grieving family's enduring pain, and a justice system that, for many, feels like it failed.
Was she a victim of a ritual killing? Or forgotten casualty of a more common yet equally devastating act of violence, maybe by a serial killer?
The full truth of what happened to Jeannette DePalma on that cliff known as the Devil's Teeth may indeed be forever lost. But her story and the truly bizarre legend that continues to surround it will likely never be forgotten.
Next time on Threads of Truth, we explore the legend of the Grinning Man, the eerie figure known as Indrid Cold, and the strange string of paranormal encounters reported in West Virginia in the 1960s.
Thank you for joining us for this exploration. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen. Your support really helps us continue to shed light on these unsolved cases and search for the truth one thread at a time.